How did you first get involved with the Coolidge Foundation?
That is an interesting story.
Please.
I was writing an essay about the New Deal, and I was looking for some commentary from an opponent, and I stumbled across an interview that Ms. Schlase, Amy Schlase, had done with Peter Robinson over at the Hoover Institution. And I looked into some of her writing more, bought a couple of her books, read them, and eventually, you know how those internet algorithms work. I was suggested the Coolidge Foundation website, and then I got an email saying that they hosted a scholarship. That's how I found out. I applied, was very lucky to be accepted, and I enjoy it very much. It's a pleasure to be a scholar.
Wonderful. Well, please tell us a bit about that experience as a scholar.
Sure. It mostly involves attending events like this, conference in Washington. The highlight is always a week we spend at Plymouth Notch in the summer. It's a bit like a summer camp, but you've got so many accomplished kids. It's a wonderful opportunity to share ideas, share experiences, and of course do some learning about Coolidge in the meantime and modern policy debates. In our week at Plymouth Notch, we'll divide ourselves up into teams and host a miniature debate tournament. And so that's always wonderful to do.
What's your favorite part?
I enjoyed the debates very much last year. Bouncing ideas off one another, learning that way.
Tell us a bit about your last debate.
Oh gosh, what was it on?
Or at least the experience of it.
It was about the how we think about Coolidge today.
Okay.
Very niche topic, but it was wonderful to hear the criticisms about Coolidge, because that's not something you often hear, especially at his presidential foundation. But we got to hear some criticism, compare him to other presidents, especially conservative presidents. And we found something that we really didn't suspect, that Calvin Coolidge would actually fit in with the modern progressive crowd very well on his ideological beliefs. He was a kind of mild opponent of prohibition, but he was, from his time as Massachusetts governor on, a staunch supporter of women's right to vote. And of course, women received that right in 1920, so he was at the forefront of the suffrage movement.
That's great. So what aspect of this conference most drew you all the way here? From Vermont, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It was hosted here last year, and I wasn't invited. I wasn't even affiliated with the foundation at that time.
You saw it on your algorithm.
I did. I got to see some of the wonderful presentations they're doing. This year, we're discussing the national debt, and that is a topic that's been in the news forever, of course, but it's gained a lot of momentum in the past year with the U.S. debt downgrades, and I thought it would be a great thing to come down here the day of the State of the Union to hear first at the conference what should be done about the national debt, how can it be lowered, and of course I can't get into the State of the Union, but we'll watch it on television and see what Congress will actually do. Of course, a spending bill just passed yesterday, so it's a fascinating experience being in the midst of it, in the city, as the national debt rises, and hearing what the Friends of the Coolidge Foundation would like to do about it.
Yeah, you know, I've had the chance to interview a couple of congressmen, congresswomen before this interview, and one of the things that they say they're most encouraged by is all the young people that are involved with the Coolidge Presidential Foundation. So it's clear that you are intelligent and you are a future leader. How would you go about encouraging your fellow peers to really take a look at this issue and how to solve it?
Okay. A lot of people tend to consider political issues to be not my problem. That's especially true with something like the national debt. For a lot of people, It's an ethereal, not an ethereal, it's a concept that never materializes. The national debt just exists in the ether and is a looming specter. But, and you sometimes see those signs in the city. What is the national debt per person? What is your share? And I think it's important to remember that with something like this, it's not just a national problem, it is an individual problem. We are all stakeholders in the national debt. We are all on the hook for it. It's our responsibility to pay it back. It's our responsibility, first and foremost, to be responsible citizens. And part of being a responsible citizen is being a responsible spender. You wouldn't spend your entire paycheck or more, or take out inordinate amounts of debt that you can't pay back in your own life. You absolutely should write to your congressman, or simply vote in a manner that encourages fiscal responsibility. This is a great country we have. It's like a great big family of 360 million, and it's our job to keep it solvent.
Absolutely. So what's the most important or surprising thing that you have heard thus far at this conference?
Gosh. Well, we're very early in the conference so far, but at dinner with Jim Grant last night, it was Congressman Smucker from Pennsylvania made a very brief appearance to tell us that I think it was the Congressional Budget Office is projecting over the next 30 years, if trends continue as they will, a national debt to GDP ratio of something near, I think it was 170% of GDP. So we're looking at almost double GDP. And to put that in perspective, he brought out a wonderful little graph that showed the last time it was even close to that high was when it was 90-odd% of GDP just after World War II. Considering there hasn't really been a similar crisis in the past decade, the idea that we have currently or very close to surpassing the post-World War II high ought to be very disturbing to everyone. That we may almost double it should be a nightmare for everyone on Capitol Hill.
Absolutely. What aspects of the Coolidge legacy do you think your peers should keep in mind when thinking about debt?
When thinking about debt, reducing it, but avoiding it in the first place. Calvin Coolidge was he likened budgeting as cheese paring. He was cutting waste everywhere. So there's a famous story, I think it was at the Naval Observatory. Office workers there were not allowed more than one pencil, and they would have to use the pencil down to the stub until their supervisor, their manager, deemed that it was impossible to write with it. Then they could get a second pencil. It's the very small things, the very small bits that encourage responsibility, that stop the national debt from accumulating. And can we reduce the national debt entirely by stopping congressmen from using multiple pencils? The answer is probably no. But cutting waste everywhere we see it is an excellent first step. Avoiding the problem is much easier than curing it later on. So penny of prevention worth more than a pound of cure.